It's astonishing to have never witnessed a title fight going the distance between Hamilton and Vettel. Both are legends of the sport, racing at the same time, with Hamilton ultimately coming out as a 7-time champ. But what about when Vettel ultimately showed up Lewis Hamilton?
Vettel and Lewis Hamilton on the run towards turn 3. Vettel's on the inside of Hamilton!
Considering the Formula One landscape in the late 2000s, Vettel and Hamilton dominated the title scene from 2008 to 2021. In fact, they won 11 out of the 13 available championship trophies, barring the 2009 edition won by Vettel and the infamous 2016 showdown where Rosberg got the better of his teammate. With Hamilton making his debut in 2007, the future champ narrowly lost out on the title to Kimi Raikkonen in his debut season, while Vettel in 2008 had become the youngest ever driver to win an F1 race. Ultimately, McLaren was far better than Toro Rosso, and Lewis won his first of many titles during the same season. The following year, a new team came into the sport in the form of Brawn GP. Here, Button and Barrichello dominated, finishing 1-2 and winning the Constructors' title. However, the team would soon change its name once again, and with the backing of Mercedes, a new powerhouse was born. Things would kick off between the two in the 2010 season, with no single driver emerging as the dominant force during the opening few races. The season saw a variety of drivers exchange punches during the opening rounds before Vettel and Hamilton would enter the final round of the season, both with an opportunity to win the title. Going into the final race, Hamilton needed to significantly outscore both Vettel and Alonso, with the German trailing the Spaniard by a single point going into the race. Vettel ultimately won the race and won his first Formula One World Championship. Vettel continued his dominance, winning 3 more on the trot, leaving Hamilton to make a decision, which ultimately forced the Brit to move to Mercedes. Vettel would stun the world by moving from his championship-winning team to Ferrari just a few years later in 2015. This move would put the German back in a car that was supposed to be on par with Mercedes after Lewis utterly dominated in 2014 and 2015. Unfortunately, Mercedes would once again dominate in 2016, leading to one of the greatest seasons ever where Rosberg and Hamilton would go toe-to-toe for the championship. Whilst the two greats went toe-to-toe frequently, often coming too close for comfort as seen in Belgium 2012, it wasn't until both of them had won a few championships that the rivalry reached its flashpoint. Heading into the 2017 season, the turbo hybrid era kicked off, and many expected that Ferrari would be back at the top. With Mercedes now the dominant force in Formula One, it was up to a new competitor to try and dethrone the championship. And in 2017, Ferrari finally took a big step towards competitiveness, setting up a straight fight for the title between Hamilton and Vettel. In the opening salvo of this saga, there was nothing to choose between the two, and both exchanged victories during the first 2 races of the season.
Nobody's been ahead of Lewis Hamilton today. Sebastian Vettel starts off 2017 by winning the Australian Grand Prix.
But as the season headed to Baku, the first moment of tension would arise. Feeling he'd been brake-checked by the British driver under the safety car, Vettel would pull up alongside the Mercedes and drove into him, prompting fierce criticism and ultimately leading to a 10-second penalty for the German. With Hamilton also suffering a headrest problem, Vettel extended his lead and ultimately came out on top during the mid-season point. At this point, a ferocious comeback from Mercedes would dash any hopes of the German, and Hamilton won 5 of the 6 following races before wrapping up the championship as early as Mexico in 2017. But this was only the start, and in 2018, Ferrari once again had a competitive car. You see, thinking of Hamilton and Vettel automatically makes die-hard F1 fans think about 2018. Vettel kicked off the season by destroying the Mercedes and taking 2 wins on the trot. It would take another 2 rounds for Lewis to come into his own and win his first race of the year, but this was mainly due to a Vettel error that handed him this win. Perhaps the biggest flashpoint of the season came at the 2018 German Grand Prix. Under torrential rain conditions, Vettel was leading the race before an unusual error sent the German into the barriers and handed the win to Hamilton. As Vettel simply outclassed Hamilton for the next few races, it seemed almost certain that Ferrari would win the championship once again. However, the the old Ferrari issue struck, and with reliability issues plaguing the team, nothing Vettel did would come close to Lewis, and Hamilton ultimately won his 5th World Championship. As the 2019 season rolled around, Vettel and Ferrari once again had ambitions of competing, but a drop in performance from the Maranello faithful saw Hamilton ultimately winning the season. A few spats between Leclerc and Hamilton ensued on track, but with issues inside the Ferrari camp, Lewis dominated the season. In the final 2 seasons at Ferrari, Vettel simply could never recover. In fact, Hamilton dominated the 2020 season with what many would describe as one of the best Formula One cars ever made. And in 2021, the title race would come down to the Red Bull of Max Verstappen and Hamilton chasing a record-breaking 8th title. So the question remains, did Vettel ever dominate Hamilton? And is this where recency bias comes in? Now, to ruffle a few feathers of Hamilton fans, we need to look at the cars themselves. But don't worry, this goes both ways. You see, the Hamilton and Vettel rivalry had a few flashpoints like Canada, Belgium and Baku in their respective seasons, but very little in terms of on-track battling took place where the race had been decided on track. For the largest part of the Vettel-Ferrari relationship, the Italian outfit simply didn't give him a car to compete with that of Mercedes. In fact, Vettel did his best to use this inferior batch of Ferrari models to actually remain in title contention with the Mercedes of Lewis. Many fans might now see this as an excuse, and this is exactly what seemed to be happening, with plenty of fans ultimately rating Lewis as the better driver. But let's rewind to the Red Bull days of Vettel. With Hamilton still driving for McLaren, cars were pretty much equal, and Hamilton and Vettel were in the prime of their young careers. From 2010 to 2013, Lewis was constantly competing against Vettel in a car that was just as good and in some cases even better. However, these 4 seasons would all culminate in Sebastian Vettel becoming a 4-time champ, while Lewis didn't even feature as a pivotal figure in the sport. In fact, Jenson Button, Fernando Alonso, and even Vettel's teammate Mark Webber would get far more credit for their driving during these seasons. While Vettel rarely showed up Hamilton on track during this period, it was the same as it was during the 2015, 17 and 18 seasons, where great strategy calls and issues plaguing the other team would allow one team to pull away. The only difference is that the seasons were far more competitive and often went to the final rounds of the season. Ultimately, when both drivers had equal machinery and the drivers were both at their peak, without any outside elements, Sebastian Vettel emerged as the better driver and would upstage Lewis on more than one occasion. Being one of the most intense rivalries ever, Lewis Hamilton was questioned about this at the 2021 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Lewis completely disregarded being dominated in the early years of their careers, but had the following to say about his rivalry during 2017 and 18. "Mine and Seb's battle was my favorite so far. It's racing against an incredible driver, not only that, but a great man in Seb, who is a 4-time world champion, and we were racing against another team. He was at Ferrari, who were very strong at the time. It took a lot out of both of us in that period of time to remain focused to deliver weekend in, weekend out. That was a difficult period for us, and it brought us closer, because the respect we have between us is huge." Ultimately, this showed that the only time Lewis managed to beat the former 4-time champ was during his time in one of the best cars on the grid. Yes, Vettel made a few errors, most notably his spin at the infamous 2018 German Grand Prix. Perhaps having Vettel and Lewis peak at the same time in reliable machinery would give a better indication of who is the better driver. Stats might favor the British driver at this point in his career, but if we are to look only at stats, the legendary Ayrton Senna would not feature much in Formula One conversations. With Vettel bowing out of the sport at the start of the 2023 Formula One season, fans never got to truly witness both these drivers dueling it out once again. Perhaps if Vettel had stayed on with Aston Martin and their 2023 monster of a car, we would once again be treated to another duel between these two rivals. Going on the form of Alonso and how he absolutely demolished the Mercedes drivers at the beginning of the season, it makes sense that Vettel might have done even better. Vettel does have a better record than Alonso, and with Mercedes not their usual dominant self, we could have been treated to a few great midfield battles. As Hamilton seems to have made his move to new pastures and followed in the footsteps of Vettel to now join Ferrari, rumors have been running wild on the internet. Could we perhaps see the 4-time champ come out of retirement like his hero Michael Schumacher to finish the story? Only time will tell. But what do you think about this rivalry, and do you think Vettel deserves more credit? Has recency bias erased the class Vettel brought to the track, or are casual F1 fans only looking at the record books? But if Vettel didn't ever truly show Hamilton who is boss, this video where Verstappen destroyed Hamilton will surely ruffle a few feathers.